Welcome to Behind the Teams. I'm your host, Nicole Howe. My career has been defined by a search for what separates good from great teams and why some teams succeed and others don't. I've looked at this from the court as a professional athlete, through my studies in psychology, and now through product and design recruitment. On this show, we sit down with leaders in digital, products, and design to dig into their stories, behaviors, and beliefs about what separates the good from great, what makes a team successful, and what defines success. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Stokes, a wonderful leader in design, having led teams at Atlassian, The Domain, and Westpac. Let's get started. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we dive in, I'll just throw it over to you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your journey in design.
Thanks, Nicole, and thank you for having me on this podcast. I describe myself kind of generically as a design leader. I've been in the world of design, experience design, etc., for about 25 years plus. And I started out in London. I started before UX was a thing. And I was started on coding and websites and in the entertainment area. And I came over to Australia about 20 years ago. Since then, I've been working in financial service, property and tech. And I've gone up from the coding through all of the layers. So coding, UI, UX, research, service design, organizational design and leadership, and a bit of organizational design. And it's almost 8 years ago, I feel, I did a master's in business coaching. And so I've got that weaving through as well. So I'm kind of a coach as well.
So you cover all aspects of it.
Yes, I try to. I've
Well,
got
I'm
range.
yeah, breadth. I'm so excited to have you on the show, and obviously we're going to cover off a couple of topics. So let's just dive straight in. I think the first one that I wanted to get your thoughts on was around influence, and I think the context for this is day to day in my role. I speak to a lot of design leaders that they're sort of pulled in a lot of different directions. They feel like they're putting out a lot of fires for their direct reports, having to kind of get quite deep into the weeds, so to speak, and unable to kind of come up from that and do a lot of the big picture strategy work that they're also tasked with doing. In terms of building up the ability for teams to influence, particularly when you're not in the room as a leader, is it something you've kind of experienced a lot in roles that you've held?
Yes, and I actually did a talk on this, a workshop on this in India recently for a content conference, design content conference, and it was called Conference. So I've actually done a bit of research into this, but I also have lived experience. And one of the key things is, as designers, we might be great at design, but we're not necessarily great at communicating that we've done that great design. So number one is do good work and make sure that people know about it. And that's as leaders advocating for your team, but also as individuals making sure that, great work gets spoken about, the impact that you have. I think often, we've probably all experienced this where a product goes live and, marketing will be talking about the great marketing and product will be talking about the great product, and design somehow gets missed off that narrative. So yes, it's a thing and it's our job to keep that alive. That would be the first thing. The other thing is building relationships and advocacy, just as a general rule, as an individual in a team, but also as a leader. So who are your advocates, and use those as force multipliers. Those are just a couple of things. They are, the second one is quite a long game. Well, it's not a long game, it's longer than communicating it. I think the other aspect is making influence a team sport as a design team. So, you're multiplying your voices. You can invite people to workshops where you talk about the work and how you work, etc., if that's relevant.
Great. And do you feel like if you're looking back at the different environments that you've been in, do you think that the ability to kind of influence has been impacted by environment, or do you feel probably a mix of environment and the people in the space? But I'm curious to know whether you feel like in finance versus maybe more of a product-led environment, does that change things?
Yes, I think it does. And I think, so there's this pace, I wouldn't say it's an issue, but the pace when you work in tech is a lot faster. It's about getting stuff out of the door and seeing how it's going. In financial services, things have to be done properly, because it's kind of a big deal with people and their money. So that makes a difference. And then I also think size of the organization can have an impact as well. So in smaller organizations, say around 1,000 people plus, the culture, it's probably more sustainable. It might just be, if it's not a tech company, it's a service company, you'll
Mm.
have a design team, a product team, and an engineering team, and there's probably more cross pollination. And then when as soon as you scale up, it becomes more difficult and you're more like a cog in a wheel. But I think the same rules still apply. It just might be less easy.
Yeah.
And I suppose the other thing is, why are you influencing? What's the reason for it? So being clear on what your narrative is and the purpose of it. I think one of them, probably the best way to influence in a kind of a big company, is by showing, not telling. So this is what we did, and this is the impact it had, and then this is the business outcome. So it's not just about design; it's about how design has worked with other teams to create impact.
Mm. I guess to your point, that's why it's kind of more of a long game sometimes if you need to
Yeah.
kind of show the value there.
Yeah, yeah. But the point is, it's not going to happen unless you do it. Unless you get an advocate somehow or another, and that does happen sometimes. Someone
Mm.
gets into it, starts to love it, never worked with a design team before, and they become a voice for you. And that has happened to me in the past, but that's
Yeah.
not predictable.
Yeah. What's your
Yeah.
advice then to a leader that's maybe starting out in a new organization? Like, what would you do as the first kind of more like into the tactical side of it? Like, who would you start to speak to first? How would you even maybe assess how design is regarded within an organization when you get there?
I did this in one of the organizations I joined maybe 4 years ago, and I did a design maturity model, because
Hmm.
the design, that organization did want to improve their maturity. So it's about understanding what the organization needs, what the team strengths are, and bringing those things together. So it's almost like a design team has a particular mission in an organization. So it's just
Hmm.
making sure that that is understood, so that you can carry forward. So it's like assessing assessing through maturity, and sometimes a certain level of maturity is okay based on what the organization needs. And then the other thing is to meet key people that you'll be interacting with, and just almost treat it like a research project. So who are you? What do you do here? What advice do you have for me? And if you ask that question, it's the same way as asking for feedback in the future. So if they
Yeah.
tell you what their expectations are, you can kind of see whether you meet that or not. So yeah, I think it is almost treating it like a research project if you're new. You also have to get to know the team and understand their capabilities as well. So, yeah, coming in as a new leader to an organization, it's a lot of work, because you have to work on the work as well as all of that other stuff.
Mm. And if you kind of have a team and then you assess, okay, maybe it is that visibility piece. They're not kind of
Mm,
they might be able to kind of carry the work through, but then they're not saying, this is the impact that
mm,
we've had, or maybe it is that building relationships. Because I think it is a skill and it is something that
mm.
takes experience as well. How do you help kind of coach those, whether they're design leads or seniors, kind of upskill in that area? Is it just about getting them out there and doing it? And maybe you lead by example, or have you approached it in other ways that have worked well in the past?
I think making things into something fun is always a good thing to do. So, uh, a way to influence on the go would be to run a design sprint for a reason,
Mm,
but you can get cross functional parties in there and collaborating in a quick way to see how it works. And that
yeah.
helps create advocacy. And that's like a win win, because you've got your team building, people are seeing what design does, you're understanding how they work, and then you get an outcome at the end of it.
Mm,
If that's not possible, then you can run workshops with people as well, which, rather than a week, it's 90 minutes or an hour. I think uh, doing that helps create visibility. And then the other thing is using existing rituals to present work or talk about impact. The other thing I would say is building relationships with your craft partners as well, and how you can present together on the outcomes. it's another way. So it's the us rather than the I.
Great. Do you think that ability to influence and maybe the understanding of kind of design's impact, have you seen that evolve over time? Like it's become designs maybe become more understood. And I know that that's probably a rabbit hole that we can go down for another kind of half an hour session. But have you seen that change at all over time?
Yes, definitely. So, but I mean, bearing in mind, I've been around a while, so I've seen it a bit like this. I think there was a time in the last decade where design thinking was the thing.
Mm,
Anyway, yeah. So design thinking was the thing, and it was like it was almost a bit faddy where business people were
mm,
doing design thinking, and the customer was at the center of everything. And I think now it's more pacey and it's more product led. So yeah, I think also the one of the issues with design is everyone has an opinion on it.
mm.
So that can be problematic. But yeah, no, I would say it's changing. It ebbs and flows, but it does depend on your organization. And you do have the ability to influence how it is perceived.
Yeah. On that point about everyone having an opinion on it, is it your sense that even within design, the opinions can be quite varied? Or do you mean external kind of people have a different?
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking external. So you might when I was in the UK, when I was on the first website, and it was the first time that no companies really had websites, and so the CEO
Mhm.
was like, oh, "I'd like a picture of me on the homepage." So that was the first experience of leadership wanting to have an impact. But you do have it. I've had a CEO saying, "My 19-year-old son thinks he could do a better job of this thing," and
Well,
you're like, "Yeah, well, I don't know if that's a good idea." But yeah, people do have opinions, and I think um, we always try and do the yes and. So you don't say no, you say yes and. Can you tell me more about that? And this is what we're thinking. If that's what you need to build relationships, but yeah.
yeah, great. Moving on then, shifting gears a bit to feedback culture, because it's something that
Mm,
I'm quite interested in. And I
mm,
think for me, with my background, so I used to play, I was engaged in elite and professional sport for a long time. So I think feedback is something that it comes quite naturally. Like in sport, it comes in a lot of different variations as well. But the biggest thing that I think maybe is a little bit of a difference between workplaces, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on this, or particularly in design teams, is in sport, it can be very immediate, it's very direct, very, very performance driven. So it's just on the fly, you're kind of getting feedback cues and adjusting. But there is an element of, post game, we'll sit down as a team, we'll understand what was the goal for that specific game. Did we achieve it? And then there's that longer term feedback about your kind of sporting career. So there's a lot of different types of feedback. It's very, very natural. Everybody knows that that's what happens. And no one really takes it too personally. What's your experience of feedback in the workplace, particularly within design teams?
I think that we could learn a lot from what you're describing because really
Mm,
that is what's required. Um, so I don't know whether people come in prepared. So when grads join an organisation and they have their first critique session and they get feedback, you kind of have to do the coaching around it's not you, it's the design. As
mhm.
designers, you're attached to the work that you do, and if you're getting negative feedback, um, I guess I'm talking about critique, which is a whole thing. Um, what I will say about that, rather than going right into it, is to say you have to set up those sessions so you know what people know what kind of feedback that they give, and then what their roles are, and then it's for you to decide whether you take that feedback on with your team. When it comes to performance feedback and so on, one thing I've noticed is that is less easy when you are working remotely.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and I think so. There's kind of like there's performance feedback, which would be half yearly, and then there's on the job feedback. As a leader, I think, or anyone really, as I spoke earlier about setting expectations. If you set expectations with people, or ask them what their expectations are, then it's easier to fit within that and then understand um, how to take that feedback on because you've been given a framework. So having some kind of structure about it is probably a good idea. We have often companies have role profiles, so you know what you're supposed to be doing, and that helps you provide feedback. That's a bit of structure as well. And again, as a leader, I would say give people positive, specific feedback as well as constructive feedback. So if someone's done a good job or you've seen someone presenting well, don't just nod and go, yeah, that was good. Just say, when you shared that design recently, what I liked about it is that you covered all of these different aspects and everyone really understood it well. So specific feedback is important, but also good feedback is important. And as a leader, you should ask for feedback too because you're role modeling it.
Very interesting. I was going to ask you on that. Have you seen systems put in place that allows the team to feel like they can come to you as a leader and provide feedback? And obviously, there's a barrier to it. It can't just be you can't have your team providing feedback to you constantly as a leader. But what mechanisms have you seen work?
Hmm. Well, I think it's actually interesting because I've been working in a global organization recently, and I think culturally, some people are more giving of feedback than others, and
Hmm.
some cultures are more hierarchical. So I would say it depends on what culture
Yeah.
you're working with. I think the point is you have to give people permission. Um, yeah, and yeah, what kind of feedback you want.
Yeah. I think in sport, which again, to your point, I think the workplace can kind of lend from this is within a team, like we always had leadership. So there's a captain, or there could be a few people that are involved in specifically being that bridge between coach and coaching staff and the
Mm,
team. And that's where it's kind of encouraged. If you've got a problem, if you don't like how something's working, whether it's could be anything, it could be when we're traveling, the food that we're eating, or it could be something about the broader strategy of the actual, team on court kind of strip strategy. You take that to leadership and you leave it there, and then it's up to them to kind of navigate through. So I think in a similar way, maybe identifying those people within the team to say, if you've got an issue, you can kind of bring it to that person. But I wonder, thinking about it out loud, will people sort of say, well, that's kind of beyond my job description, isn't it? And you get that kind of pushback there.
yeah, I mean, I think so. I think everyone's got their jobs to do, and I think, well, for me, when I am having issues in the past, I've gone to my manager and I've said,
Mm,
this particular thing I'm experiencing is above my pay grade. I need some support with you. And that's not necessarily feedback, but it's I guess you're pointing out somewhere you need support from your manager that you're not currently getting. So there is something in that, in the way that you
yeah.
describe it.
And what
Yeah.
about peer to peer? Like, do you find, and let's just keep it specific within design teams, within teams that you've been in before, is that common where peers are giving each other kind of feedback? Because again, in sport, it's like you'll hear it if a teammate's not happy with something that you're doing, and often it's more on the court. So more of that immediate day to day kind of feedback. Do you see that?
I would say, let me just think about this. I think that is, I'm just thinking. I think it takes a certain maturity to be able to frame feedback in a way that is constructive to your peers,
Hmm.
unless you have that kind of relationship. I'm thinking about constructive feedback.
Yeah.
Um, but there are certainly ways to do it. And um, usually it's by asking a question rather than coming forward with, do you want some feedback? It might be, uh, how did you feel about when that happened? Can we
Yeah.
talk about that or something? Yeah.
Do you think it would be helpful if there was a culture where peers felt like they're able to kind of share? And as you say, obviously needs to be respectful, constructive, and it does take experience to be able to know, when should I? Does someone even need the feedback? When should I deliver it? How I should deliver it? But do you think that would be beneficial for teams?
Yeah, I think so. But I think, yeah, I think you need to have to frame it up as to how you might do that as a team.
Mm,
Because I think often what happens is people go to the manager about somebody, um, and I personally, if you're dealing with people that are senior, I would hope that they can have those conversations amongst themselves and solve them themselves. But yes, I agree. I know that we're going to be talking about team dynamics, and I think this one spills into that a bit.
Yeah. Well, let's shift into that then, because I know it's something that we have touched on before, and you sort of approach team dynamics through complex adaptive systems. Am I right? I'll throw it
Mm.
over to you to kind of give a bit of an overview of that.
Well, when we discussed talking about this, it reminded me it was an assignment I had during my coaching masters on team dynamics and complex adaptive systems. And the point of that is, without going in deep into the theory, is that every time something new comes into a system, it changes the system. And so therefore, I believe that teaming is an always on activity. So um, and therefore it should be to some extent deliberate as to how you not how I manage team dynamics, but how we as a team manage our dynamic. So, and I think the other interesting thing about teams is a team the group of people that you work with on a project, or is it your craft team? And the answer is probably both. If you're working on a project with people or a product, um, you really do have to have strong team dynamics to match the pace of the work that's required. And I would recommend having some form of team play, like a workshop, and you can Google team playbooks for kicking off teaming. And that might be, what's your communication style? What enrages you? What engages you? Um, how you like to receive feedback. So you've had those conversations, and so it's like we've got permission now to know so and so likes to focus during that period of time, and that's what they need to do. But they're willing to collaborate during these times, and so it kind of allows you to understand the team, but you can also have fun with that as well.
Mm. And on the project and craft teams, how do you
Mm.
see that as different then in understanding team dynamics? Is it?
Yeah, I think it is because I might have somebody on my as it's if I'm in a team with an OC, I might have someone on my team I've never worked with, and they might be heaps of fun. But I've never worked with them. I don't know what they're like to work with. So it's a different relationship. And so in that team dynamics, it might be more about what can we learn from each other as designers, and how can we share strengths on what we know and in a design craft. And for design teams, you usually have rituals, whether it be weekly team meetings or retros, where you can talk about how things are going. And equally, you have those with your project teams, so you can introduce a bit of team dynamics there when things are starting to. I just keeping an eye on how things are tracking. An example would be when I worked at Domain, we had weekly team meetings, and so we used to do fun. We had a predictable meeting schedule that I always ended on dad jokes, but it included shout outs, included spotlight on a particular product. So yeah, it was good
I didn't know
to
you
build
were
the
into dad
culture.
jokes. One of my favorite things.
Heavily,
Can I put you on?
heavily it's dad jokes.
Really? I'll put you on the spot. Have you got one?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh no, you have. I'll come back to you before the end of this.
Okay, pressure's on there. Um, so if I'm understanding it correctly, then you kind of view it as the team and the team dynamics. They're kind of a living thing, right? And they'll always be evolving. And as a leader, you need to be kind
Yeah.
of dialed in to that. Is that kind of the
Yeah.
sense of,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
pretty much
Is
it.
it?
And yeah.
No, you go.
I was going to say, noticing when people are stepping backwards and not participating, making sure that they're okay. It's that kind of thing as well.
Mm. Well, that was what I was going to say. So, is it something that you can use as a way to kind of view teams, but does it go further than that as well and provide more of a framework to help you understand? Well, how do I see if the team dynamics aren't working? Like, how do you actually make an assessment of change needs to happen here? And if you feel the team dynamics are a bit off, how do you then kind of implement change to help that?
Hmm, that's a tricky one. It might be, I think the thing is, in life we have lives outside of work, and sometimes people are struggling. So we need to make sure that there aren't any issues with people outside of work that might be impacting their work. So that's probably like the mental health aspect. And I think aiming for a psychologically safe space as well, where people can share how they're feeling. Um, and if I guess if dynamics are wrong or difficult between people, it might be worth talking to them about what's going on at the moment, and what needs to happen there.
Yeah.
But that's a very generic answer. It kind of depends on what the situation is.
Which I think is kind of the point as well, right? That each team is kind of its
Yeah,
own. Like you really need to get in there and
yeah,
assess.
yeah, and I think personality driven as well. So, depending on the manager might set a certain tone. A new person might come in that's a massive extrovert
Mhm.
and takes over in a good way or a bad way. We don't know, but it's gonna dial things up. So yes, definitely.
How do you view your input then as a leader through that lens? Like, if let's take that example, if somebody comes into the team, massive extrovert, kind of shakes up, and some of this stuff is very much like, it's not spoken, right? It's a little bit hidden, but you can see or feel that something maybe has shifted. Do you take quite a proactive approach as a leader to get in there and try to kind of change dynamics, or what do you do? Or do you see it as more of a passive leadership thing, or is it a bit of a mix? Like you need to, in some ways, set structure, set routine, in other ways, provide areas where things can just kind of flow a little bit.
Yeah, I think again, it would depend if it's having a huge ripple effect. It might be that we do a team play and talk about uh, how we all work and how we like to be communicated with, and then it might be as simple as having run focus groups in the past, just making sure that everyone has a voice in a meeting.
Yeah.
If that is the issue, like just doing around the room, everyone gets a turn. Yeah,
No, fully. Because
talking stick time.
no, but I think as someone like I don't particularly see myself as very extroverted in groups, especially. I kind of lose my
Yeah.
voice. I think those things are really important to give a chance for people to speak up. I think it's really important.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we have to look for is making sure that just because someone's not saying anything doesn't mean to say they haven't got an
Mm,
opinion. And also
mm,
the other thing is some people process after meetings as well. So it's, managing all of those aspects as well.
yeah.
Like knowing some people need to sleep on a thing. You might say, oh, this is happening, and they'll go, okay, and you'll know that they'll probably have something really interesting to say tomorrow.
I guess that's what you mean about being always kind of dialed in as a leader, because it is
Yeah.
something that you're going to have to stay across. And people, to your point before, people have lives outside of work and they may show up, really well for even years. And then something might sort of change in their personal life as well. And if you're not
Yeah.
across that, you'll miss it. And yeah,
Yeah. And I think the thing is as well, again, it depends on the kind of leader you are. I I try and understand people where they're coming from so that I can work with them. Um, and not everyone needs to do that or wants to do that. So it depends, yeah, on who you are.
yeah, like as a leader, though, I would say you probably I would think you would do need to kind of listen
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
understand your team in order to get the best out of them. Like even in sport, I've seen coaches inherit a team for a season. I think there's obviously an impact that you can have if you're there long term, but sometimes you do
yeah.
inherit a team and you've got to work with the people that you've got. And most of the time people can get along, as you say, if the proper things were put in place to help people understand what is our
Yeah.
kind of shared goal here, how does everyone prefer to work, and then I think the key part is maybe following through. Like it's one thing to sort of say, tell me, Sarah, how you prefer to kind of work, what
Mm,
enrages you, what engages you. And then I just disregard it and, move forward the
yeah.
way I want. I think that breaks a lot of trust in teams.
Yeah. And I do think that is a thing in itself is when you use any form of intervention, uh, it kind of has to live on some way. Otherwise, what's the point? And an example would be if we've all had leadership training, we've all had a particular kind of training, and we're all really into it, and then we just lose it over time. I think you've got to decide what you're going to maintain,
Mm.
and yeah, carry on with it.
Was it an intentional thing to kind of move into leadership? Like, were you Can you remember a point in your career where you're like, oh, yeah, that's the path that I want to take?
Yeah, so I consciously didn't want to be a leader.
Right.
When I one of my first jobs was being a supervisor in a call center for theatre in London's West End, and
Oh,
I was like 23, and I found it very difficult because there was a lot of big personalities that you can imagine, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'd just rather not manage people, all those big personalities. So it wasn't until I became a mother something clicked. And I thought maybe I can handle it. So yeah, it was something I consciously didn't want to do. And then when I did become a manager, and it was like an identity crisis as to what kind of manager I would be. And then yeah, it's the thing that struck me at that point was different these days, but now then it was like you haven't got your hands on tools anymore, and so
mm.
that was giving up those skills was a big thing. But I think that's different now with the player coach scenario.
Yeah, it's a conversation I have a lot with designers. I think a lot of them still, even though player coach is becoming a lot more common, definitely in this market, but a
Hmm.
lot of people kind of on that cusp of trying to figure out, do they want to pursue the craft more than they do people leadership? And maybe similar to how you felt in the role as supervisor of that call center, a lot of designers that tell me flatly, I do not want to ever manage people. What would you say to designers that are maybe on the cusp of not sure where they want to go, or maybe even if they're really certain? What would you say about leadership that maybe surprised you, or what have you learned about yourself that you think, I am really glad I took the leap?
I think so. I think it took a while. It was a transition for me. I do think there's something about having agency in your work. Um, what I would say to somebody who wants to be a leader is act as if you're a leader, you're managing yourself, and you're leading your project, which you can do. And how does that feel? Um, yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, the world's changing so much with AI, and so um, I would say if you feel like doing it, give it a go.
I love that. Why not? If I think about me managing my own life, it's overwhelming. So I don't know whether I would want to be doing any more
I
than
think
that.
I think that's where I was, which was I don't
Yeah.
even feel responsible for myself, so why would I want to manage people?
Well, I can kind of see how then, obviously, becoming a mother, you're like, well, actually, now I'm kind of responsible for more than just myself. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I,
you
I
can do
can
it.
come to work. I can come to work having dropped a small child off at daycare centre and nothing's broken, so perhaps I can do leadership.
Do you think it provides more perspective then? And this
Being
is
becoming
obviously a digression. Yeah, becoming a mother.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It probably depends when you become a mum. I was in my 30s, and so it was a big change. So
Mm,
yeah, it was like, as I say, it was an identity crisis, not just becoming a leader, but also who I am. Who am I as a person, as a grown up?
mm.
In brackets, I'm still not grown up, so it's okay. You don't have to grow up.
Or maybe it's something we can dive into on another episode. But I think
Yeah,
we'll leave it there. That's a wrap for now, unless you've got the dad joke.
I have. What kind of summer wear does a frog wear on their feet?
Oh, I don't know.
Open open-toed sandals.
That's good. That's good. What
Oh,
a way to end.
thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Sarah. And for everyone listening out there, how can people connect with you?
Well, you'll find me on LinkedIn, Sarah Stokes, and currently I have some spots available for coaching. I'm also doing a bit of talking at the moment, so speaking at some conferences this year on adaptive leadership, and I've recently done a meetup with my colleague Shari on authentic communication at a recent design thinking. So if you're interested in any of those topics, give me a shout.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Nicole.
Of course. That's it for today's episode of Behind the Teams. If you found today's episode valuable in any way, the best way to support the show is to share it with one other leader who's currently building a team. For more insights on the intersection of product design and psychology and the future of work, let's connect on LinkedIn. I'm Nicole Howe, and this is Behind the Teams. Thanks for listening.